Caucus of the Senate has dismissed claims that the Senate rejected electronic transmission of election results, insisting that lawmakers approved electronic transmission during a consideration of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Speaking at a press briefing at the National Assembly, Senator Enyinnaya Abaribe, former minority leader, reiterated the Senate president's position, saying such claims are misleading. And Senator Godswill Akpabio earlier clarified that the House, instead of rejection, retained the existing provision of the Electoral Act. Meanwhile, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, the African Democratic Congress and civil society organizations have condemned the alleged decision to not expressly adopt real-time electronic transmission of election results, describing it as a serious betrayal of democracy that undermines transparency, credibility, and public trust in the country's electoral process. So to discuss this, I am joined by Sergius Ogun, a former member, House of Representatives, and a current member of the African Democratic Congress. Sergius Ogun, thank you so much for joining us if you are online. Okay, so we'll try as much as possible to get audio feeds from your end. In the meantime, Kenneth Eze, lead director and governance expert, Speak Out Africa Initiative, also joins this loop from Abuja. Thank you so much, Eze. Okay, so I'm told that Eze is yet to join us. In the meantime, Dr Sam Amadi, director, the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought from Abuja, joins us to discuss this. Dr. Amadi, it's nice to have you around.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we're going to start with you, Dr. Amadi, but then before we delve into the conversation proper, let's watch this video excerpt where some senators further debunked the news that the Red Chamber rejected the electronic transmission of results in the newly amended Electoral Act. Let's take a listen.
To put the records straight, yesterday, the Senate did not, I repeat, did not pass transfer of results, which was in the 2022 Act. What we passed, and which the Senate President himself, when he was doing a clarification sitting on his chair, is transmission of results. And I need to make this very clear. Every one of us who is a senator, who has the privilege to represent a senatorial district, came here under the trust of their senatorial zone. And the reason for us to go into a closed session was so that we can tidy up all the niggling things inside there. And when we now come back to plenary to pass it, that we will pass it without any rancor. I can assure you, on my honor and the honor of all of us who are standing here, that both the Electoral Committee of the Senate, then the Ad hoc Committee of the Senate, and also in the executive session that we had, that we all agreed on section 63, which is electronic transmission of votes. Electronic transmission of results. Transmit, not transfer. What is in 2022 is transfer. And we don't want a law that is vague. We don't want a law that will be misinterpreted by anybody. We want a law that is clear, concise, and can be interpreted by all, and that is unambiguous. So it is electronic transmission of results, yes.
So that is Senator Enyinnaya Abaribe, it's Senator representing Abia South Senatorial District, giving further clarity to the issue as regards what the position of the Senate is, looking at the amendment of the Electoral Act, most especially as it speaks to either transmission or transfer, so to speak, based on the Electoral Act. But then let's just start with Dr. Amadi. Now, the Senate has yet again denied reports that it's rejected the electronic transmission of results, clarifying that the word transfer has been substituted for transmits. How would you respond to this?
Well, thank you for having me. First, let me say clearly that what we saw or what we have seen now is effort at damage control. First, what the Senate President purported to have passed by the Senate was a version that contradicted the version of the House, which is why it has gone ahead to purportedly establish a conference committee. Conference arises when there's a discrepancy between what the House passed and what the Senate passed. So, what the other members have put together is to say that maybe that was not what they agreed to pass. Maybe that was not what the committee presented and they deliberated and agreed. But what Nigerians heard on television and the Senate President initially said was to adopt the old text. The old text is intriguing. First, as a constitutional law scholar, as a administrative law scholar, I've argued that even the old 2022 Electoral Act gave INEC the power to decide on the mode. And INEC made the regulation pursuant to the Constitution, sections 62, I think, or 52 years, amended 53, and the Electoral Act itself, and that what INEC, the regulations INEC made were binding. But the courts did not accept the argument and wrongly ruled that INEC could walk away. And that's why everybody now wants clarity. Say, look, let's forget what should have been interpreted. We just want to spell out clear. Those results should be transmitted electronically. And again, if you look at the Act, there are two transfer, if you like. There is a transfer to the collection center, but as a transmission to INEC's dedicated portal, which is what the guideline. So what we wanted and what everybody wants is take it away from the guideline, put it straight expressly in the Act, so that no mischievous judge or court or even INEC itself would go to argue that it was discretionary. So the 23 election problem is because INEC argued that its own regulation, which should be binding, was discretionary. And the judges wrongly endorsed that view. And that meant that all the mutilations in rivers, in several places, could no longer be challenged. So, what the Senate has done, maybe that's not what their members wanted, but what the Senate President has led them to do is to purportedly, or at least officially, they said, pass the old provision. And that's against the majority of the Nigerian people's view. And so the campaign is going to come in the days to come is to get the Senate to go back to the version of the House of Reps.
Okay.
Which version recognize the need for change. You see, the lawyers will say, what was the mischief? The mischief was that the law was interpreted badly. What was the remedy? The remedy was to foreclose interpretative conflicts and state expressly the need for transmission to dedicated IRF. That the Senate version has undermined. So the campaign is that we must have to go back to what the House passed, and that should be the final copy of the Electoral Act.
Okay, so Mr. Ogun, this is like the second time that we are going to be witnessing a situation where there are discrepancies around what is passed, what is ratified, most especially in Nigeria's National Assembly. How do you view this in terms of the words transfer, transmit, what the Senate President said, what Senator Abaribe said, and what the statements in the amendment bill, both the Electoral Act of 2022 and what we are meant to have now? I mean, why do we have different versions?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me again. They have clarified, Senator Abaribe and co have clarified that what they passed in the Electoral Committee is transfer. What they also agreed in the ad hoc committee set up by the Senate President is electronic transfer. And what they agreed in the executive session is electronic transfer. So we don't know what Akpabio is up to, but he's showed his leg. APC have shown their leg. So it's good to know from day one what their plans are. But I can tell you for free that this will not stand. It will not stand. Because we had a similar issue in the 9th Assembly when the APC did not allow for even the transfer. It took a President Buhari, when it was transmitted to him, to say, he returned it to us and say they should do the transfer. That's section 60, sub 5 of the 2022 Act. Of course, like Dr. Amadi already explained now, the judiciary also traveled along that line to say it was not expressly stated, hence they cannot rely on the IREV. So that's why we are back to where we are now. So the Senate, the House cannot agree, and the majority of the Senate agree on what to do, and maybe one man and some few people around him take instructions from somewhere will do otherwise. But I can tell you for free that it will not stand. They are just flying the kite.
Okay, so Dr. Amadi, let's look at most especially the clause 60 as presented for consideration. Now, I would like the slide to be, of course, uploaded so that those at home would also see this. Now, that clause says the presiding officer shall electronically transmit the results from each polling unit to the INEC results viewing portal in real time, and such transmission shall be done after the prescribed form EC8A has been signed and stamped. So that was the clause proposed. Now, can we safely assume that we actually do not understand what the position of the Senate is and what INEC is meant to do in this case? Because is it about transfer, transmission, or should we be looking at the fact that maybe INEC will be the one to use their discretion to implement, since this particular clause is not being, of course, obeyed or observed?
Okay, so like the honorable member, observed, in the last election, the last amendment, run up to it, APC senators opposed. Now, look at the issue. First, they said, well, maybe we should allow it to the internet managers.
Dr. Amadi, sorry to butt in right now. We need to quickly go on a very short break, so I'd like you to just hold your thoughts. All right, so when we return, we would have your summation on this. We'll be back. Let's go on a break. And yes, we are, of course, considering the issues as regards to Nigeria's Electoral Act, even as we understand that the Senate have come out to reject whatever news that is in the winds, that they have rejected, of course, the clause that has to do with the transmission or the transfer of results, electronic transfer of results to the IREV. They said that that particular bill or that law is there, and they have actually retained what is actually in the Electoral Act for 2022. And after that has generated a lot of dusts. Now we need to bring this to the fore and get details from our gentleman, that is Sergius Ogun, former member, House of Representatives and member of the ADC, and of course Dr. Sam Amadi, who is the director of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, so that we can actually have clarity on what the Senate is saying. So, Dr. Amadi, I'd like you to continue with what you're trying to say as regards the proposed clause and what the position of INEC should be as regards this and the Senate, based on what they said. Okay,
so the clause that you read is a clause that INEC introduced through its lawmaking powers through the regulation. And that clause talks about electronic transmission of results to a platform dedicated. Again, before now, the election results have been collected. Collection has always been there, which is where INEC uses the president officer sign-off result, take to collection center. If it's a governorship election, you finally get to the state where it's announced. If it is a presidential election, the states will now take to the National Collection Center for announcement. That is collection. And the courts have said that based on the old act, that process continues. But what INEC did with the IREV was when INEC sponsored that power, that direct transmission, the House wisely maybe said then that some people said maybe the technology is bad, maybe it can't do electronic transmission. The legislature wisely gave the agency, the expert in INEC, to decide a mode. That's why it says by a mode to be prescribed by INEC. INEC goes ahead to prescribe that mode, which is in the clause 16. That clause was not complied with. And so when litigants went to court, P2B, Atiku Abubakar, and another person, it came up for interpretation. And the High Court at the then particular Supreme Court says, well, the mode of collection is manual, which is correct, but that this item is not a collection center. It is a portal, a platform INEC built to verify. It's a verification platform. So INEC uses it to verify, make sure the results that are collected are the accurate result uploaded in real time. Now, let's not forget that INEC built this because election results were being disputed often because people manipulate. Along the way, they will smuggle, fake results. Along the way, they will mutilate, they will announce fake results, and there are no real-time evidence to say what was the result from the polling unit. So with the IREV, INEC has a capacity now to say this result from this particular polling unit or this local government or this constituency is fake because the real one uploaded in real time is X and not Y. Now, what is being sought to do is that since the court has wrongly, in my view, made a decision that the proper thing is that INEC does delegated legislation under administrative law. So you give agency power, then the central bank, they enact monthly MPR, which is the inflation rate, or where I was before as a chairman, the Legislative Regulatory Commission, the tariffs we make are law. We make it pursuant to the power the Electricity Act gave us. The same way INEC made the regulation pursuant to the power, but the Supreme Court messed it up. So the point now is for the legislators to take back that clause 60 and put it as an act, in which case it's not a question of discretion, it's now a question of the law mandating INEC, not INEC making a subsidiary legislation.
Okay.
And that's the fight. So what's happened, the confusion is that the Senate refused to put this as the law and say, let's keep it the way it was as interpreted by Nigerian court, which means INEC is not bound.
Okay, so yes, let's take it from there and bring it to Mr. Ogun. Now, in the Senate President's reaction speech, he said, and I quote, "We have retained what was in the previous provision by way of amendments." That's what he said. But then the previous provision that he was referring to, that is the Electoral Act 2022, carried the word transfer. Now, the provision according to Section 60, subsection 5 of the Electoral Act reads, and I quote, "The presiding officer shall transfer." Senator Abaribe said it has been changed to transmit. So either transmit or transfer of the results, including the total number of accredited voters and the result of the ballot in a manner as prescribed by the commission. So even if we are talking about transfer or we are talking about transmit and it looks muddled up and messed up, just as Dr. Sam Amadi has said, shouldn't the law be, unambiguous so that it is clear for us to see?
Well, like Dr. Amadi said, I didn't agree with the court then, and I still don't agree with the court today. In a constitutional democracy, the rule of law is key. I have always said this. Like he also explained clearly, the guidelines, INEC guidelines that gave them power to do voters registration, to update the register, then to really conduct election is the same power they have to say this is how the election will be conducted, whether it be transmitted or transferred. And INEC under Yakubu said they were going to transmit. We know all the politics they played. I can remember all the politics APC played then, so that there will be no transfer. But that the court bought into that is a big challenge. But having said that, today, we have all agreed as Nigerians, because of what happened in 2023, that we want, the court have said, it must be documented, it must be in the law. Some of us are against this, because if you begin to put everything in an act in the Constitution, one day the Constitution will be bigger than this country. But even now, the National Assembly have done that, so to speak, majority of them have done that. And some people are trying to thwart that effort. So it's clear, the transfer was even enough. But that the court went in to say where the transfer means is manual collation. Now that they are saying transmit to the IREV portal, real time, that would have solved most of the problems agitating the minds of Nigerians. That some few senators, not all of them, are trying to change this is something we must all resist. Just don't look at it as transfer, transmit. What's the difference? There is a world of difference, like the courts have said today. There's a world of difference. So it must be transmitted real time from the voting unit. It's on record that people go to collation center and bring fake results. Other times, at gunpoint, they will get INEC officials to announce results. But with the transmission real time, that cannot happen again. Because when you are transmitting from the unit, goes straight to INEC portal. You can stay in your home and view it on IREV.
Okay. Now, Dr. Amadi, I'm looking at the legal implications of this and also what this would mean for Nigeria's electoral process. Is there going to be a difference between what happened in 2023 and what we are going to see in 2027 with this?
Well, yeah, I'm not too sure. Look, if this Senate version prevails, which I believe will not, the Nigerians should come out and reject it and resist it. But if it does prevail, then we're going to be at the mercy of the Supreme Court coming to instances and saying, which is unusual, to say we were wrong. And this Supreme Court has not shown any sign that it's going to come up and say we were wrong. And in fact, it's actually more dreadful now to think in terms of judicial justice. So as much as possible, we want to take it out of the courts. The courts have proved serially unreliable, and basically it's a bad bargain. If you're a gambler, you shouldn't bet on the Supreme Court or the Court of Nigeria for justice in election. Then it falls strongly under INEC, because let's not forget, if INEC had done what it ought to do by transmitting, no court would have said they did wrong. So the problem is not even the politicians who probably rigged the election. It's INEC who did not uphold the sanctity of its own process. So the credit of this election lies with INEC. Unfortunately, the board of appointment and the capability of the INEC people. I mean, look, Jega, people say, oh, Jega did the pitch he did because Jega was ASU president. Jega had a history and a profile of courage, resisting authority, military rule. So a Jega, supported by Northern civil society and Northern politicians and himself not being bought over by the Jonathan, maybe political agenda, had enough support to resist the ruling party. That's what saved us. Now, I can't say so about Amuputa. Now, the board of operation the capture of state institution by this government. Jonathan was very, very respectful of separation of power. Jonathan was respectful of independence. In fact, I was with Jega last week in Lagos for an event, and Jega said Jonathan did not try to compromise him. So if this holds, then we are at the mercy of INEC to decide to do what the law say can do, because if they do the right thing and transmit, nobody will question it. But if they don't, they will go to court. The Nigerian court will fail us again.
Okay, so we are at a crossroad where we are looking at a question mark on Nigeria's electoral umpire, which is an institution. Even the man who is also heading the institution, that is Joash Amopiton. There's also a clause on the National Assembly in terms of their legislative duties as regards this electoral act. A lot that we need to discuss, I must let you know. But then we are going to go on a short break. And when we return, we'll look at if there's a way we can deal with these clauses hanging over these people and this institution, and see if we can indeed have a free and fair election in 2027. So stay with us. So we are concluding on the Electoral Act amendment and the issues tied to them. So let me come to Mr. Ogun. We had technical glitches in the election in 2023, and Dr. Amadi raised concern about the new INEC boss, Joash Amopiton, who was actually promised a seamless election come 2027. Now, with these new amendments, can we actually trust INEC to deliver credible elections next year?
Right. We have challenged the mode of appointment of the INEC chairman. If you remember, Professor Yakubu, the then INEC chairman, went to Osun. That's the last election before the presidential in 2023. Ran a smooth election to convince everybody. People sat at home and viewed that on the IREV, and he told the world that is what is going to happen in 2023. Now, suddenly, they said that there were glitches. So it's now for us to hold past this act, as has been recommended, to transmit and hold the feet of INEC to fire. Because I have said it some time back that the APC, the INEC, the judiciary will soon run out of excuses. Yes, because whatever they did in 2023, they cannot repeat it in 2027. So that's where this rigmarole. So it's for us to hold INEC's feet to fire to say you must transmit in this way. Although we have heard rumors that there will be prepared results that will be transmitted to the portal. But we also have a solution to that. I will not say it here. But first, just transmit from the units. And then when we get there, we'll cross the bridge.
Okay, so Dr. Amadi, now the Senate also rejected the provisions for electronic voter downloads, voter card downloads, and also reduced election notice periods and shortened the timelines for the publication of the list of candidates. There's also the issue around fines to be paid for electoral offenders. Now, do you consider this, is this actually electoral reform or electoral sabotage?
Maybe more of sabotage. They altered the things that were not problematic and left the real problem, which is how do we ensure the accuracy of the votes that we count? You see, the high thing about election, and from a political economist or political scientist, is very clear. It's about equality of voting opportunity. Everybody has equal, all citizens can vote equally, and all votes count equally. So that's why the key thing you should focus on is to ensure ease of voting, that nobody disenfranchises others, and that people, when they vote, they have reliability that their votes are counted accurately. Okay. That determines the nature of the votes and the integrity of election. So what they did with, why should they reduce the time for campaign? They should actually probably leave it the way it was. Reducing the fine or increasing the fine might not be very important to elections. They can decide to increase fine or reduce fine. As a matter of fact, there should be more increase of the sanctions for electoral offenses should be more and not less. So in my view, cosmetic, reduction is a reversal, and ultimately evidence that they don't even care much about the importance of credible election. Look, this is a government that's also about to prosecute coup plotters or alleged coup plotters. That what that tells you, that if you look at the epidemic of coups across West Africa, Nigeria is at risk. And these coups in West Africa were procured largely by rigged elections, unfair electoral system. So that should mean that the most patriotic work any Nigeria should do so that we don't ever introduce virus is to make elections super credible.
Okay, fantastic. So, beautiful. So, Dr. Ogun, how do we make INEC morally accountable?
Well, all we can do is to, like I said earlier, the mode of appointment is faulty, but there's nothing we can do about that now. But it's to insist on whatever the law has said today, to insist on it. And when we do that, they will do the right thing. Like Dr. Amadi said, Professor Jega said that Jonathan did not pressure him. But we know the last set of INEC chairmen are not anywhere close to who Jega was or who Jega is. But this is Nigeria. Nigeria belongs to all of us. If the law says this is the way to go, we will insist and we will stand by that.
All right, thank you so much, Sergius Ogun, former member, House of Representatives, and current member of the African Democratic Congress, and of course, Dr. Sam Amadi, who is director of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thoughts. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts with us on the show.